right, so we've got you back here, Zev, round three. Thanks for all the other times, and I'm sure a lot of people have more questions from the last times I've had you on and new things that are occurring. I know that last time we did speak about PMAs, and I know that you mentioned that you were working on one. I believe that you've sorted your one that you've been working on at the moment. I just wanted to address what is a PMA?
Well, look, the short answer of what is a PMA, it's a private members association, but they vary to other private members or clubs or private associations as they give us a little bit more autonomy.
Mm.
So PMA is a great way of establishing our own system of governance, of creating rules and laws or bylaws, as we refer to them in the Articles of Association, to which we actually consent to being governed by. Now, this is opposed to all the BS that's imposed on us, to which, of course, none of us consented to being governed by. We didn't ask to be governed by liars and thieves and pedos. That's not what we requested. And none of us, surely, if we knew what was going on, would consent to that. So, through the creation of properly established and properly constructed PMAs, we can create our own system of governance. And that's basically what a PMA is. It's a private members association that is for the benefit of your members, of your particular private members association. And one of the main benefits those members get is a consent, a valid contract as to the laws, rules, and regulations that we actually consent to being governed by. And we have every right to do this sort of thing under our rights of self-determination, which are recognised under international law. So some of these international laws, treaties, and covenants have actually been codified into our federal law here in Australia at a Commonwealth level, which means that we can utilise these for our benefit and our protection from the corruption that we've seen so widely spread and the overreach of government, especially the last few years through COVID. Many of us didn't want to be a part of, but no one knew how to opt out, so to speak. So we could opt out, but we need to have some system of governance in place. So I'm not suggesting that we all just go and be anarchist and do whatever we like. There is still the morals that go with that, the honour, the integrity, and the responsibility of operating in such a manner. And look, we're not Crimsday is what it comes down to. I'm not interested in robbing banks or hurting people and thieving stuff. Just want to be left alone to live an honest life. And the PMA is something, when they're done properly, that can actually help people to do that by creating our own laws and terms and conditions to which we agree to live by and that we agree to be governed by.
If I was to get a PMA, what would be some like benefits for me if I was to have one done?
Well, look, again, the main benefit is we're creating our own system of government and governance. We have the rights to self-govern and the rights of self-determination to self-determine that we are capable to do that for ourselves.
Mm.
As one of the main benefits, we're literally creating our own rules and laws to live by. Now, from a business perspective, is why a lot of people are interested in these, because we can effectively, with a properly done PMA, you can write yourself out and free from any legislative requirements or obligations. We're not bound to these statutes because the statutes didn't create the PMA.
Yeah.
We come back to my basic thing, D, of God or nature, depending on your spiritual religious beliefs. God or nature created man, man created government. Now,
Mm.
that which we create can't have authority over us, not
Mm.
without consent or a contract or something along those lines. Much in the same way, we don't get to claim authority above God or nature. So we create these PMAs so that we have the authority over them, but the catch there is we have to be bound to those authorities that we create. And we do it in an honourable fashion where we're not out there causing harm, loss, damage, or injury. And if you do provide the bloody remedy, it's not rocket science. If I crash my car into your car accidentally or deliberately, do not that I do it deliberately, but let's say it was an accidental, I've caused damage, I'm liable for the remedy. It's that simple.
Mm. And can you explain how it's possible to use the PMA in a protective manner?
Yeah, real life protective remedy is what a lot of us are seeking. How do we protect ourselves from the overreach of the government? And to put it simply, it's not as complex as people think. We create our own private members association and we operate under that. So the big benefits, one, your members get to then operate under those rules and laws and bylaws that we've created as well by consent. which means we're not bound or obligated to any statutory or legislative requirements, obligations, or observances. We have our own system of laws in place, which we've agreed to, which we've consented to.
Mm.
We're going to operate by that. So that's one of the massive bonuses for members or for having your own PMA, a bit of both, is that we can write ourselves out of and free from legislative and or statutory requirements or obligations. We still have requirements and obligations, but they're to the PMA, not our so-called government. And it's a change in mindset. It's a paradigm shift, however you want to refer to it there, D. But it's giving us the option to create that for ourselves and to do it without the corruption and the overreach, because we're in control of that PMA because we created it. So if you created it, it's yours. You have the authority over it. And again, with that, and I don't want to give away too much of what's actually in our PMA, we do have actual laws in there that we're happy to be a part of, such as our natural common law is one of them that I've listed as an example there, which
Mm.
says that we're not to have the intent or intention via action or inaction to cause any harm, loss, damage, or injury. Now, should that happen, accidentally or otherwise, again, if you've caused the damage, you're liable for the remedy. It's that simple. There is an injured party, and we must provide remedy if we've caused any suffering or harm, loss, damage, or injury. So this is a big way of freeing ourselves from the nonsense of the so-called government, like a speeding fine for a couple of $100, for example, for 3 or 4 Ks over the limit.
Mm.
When there's no injury, there's no loss, there's no harm, there's no damage. What are we paying for? I've said for a long time, if it's punishable by a fine, then it just means it's legal for a price. Again, we're not crims, we're not robbing banks and thieving stuff. That's definitely the wrong thing to do. And yeah, you could do jail time for that. No one's doing jail time over 3 or 4 Ks over the limit. It's because it's legal for a price. So
Mm.
what we're doing is creating our own legal contract, if you like, of a system of laws and governance that we're actually happy to live by. And that's not just for, dealing with fines or whatever. You're still going to have to deal with that, even with the PMA. But we can apply our own system of governance to any of these claims brought against us with the PMA because we have the benefit of our membership and our agreement and contract there, which is private, not public. I'd put this another way. It's illegal to go around punching people. Yeah, but if you're a member of a private sporting club, say a boxing or a martial art club, that's okay, as long as it's done on that club's membership rules and terms in the dojo or the ring. As a professional boxer, for example, or a martial artist, we're not allowed to walk down the street and just fight with anyone. That's outside of the rules of our club membership or our private members association, whether it's set up as an actual PMA or a club or a membership. Those membership rules apply above and beyond that of the government regulations and legislations that we're informed of. Yeah, footy players are the same. They're members of a footy club. They don't have to punch the shit at each other on the field. They don't get arrested or charged, do they?
Mhm.
Why? Because they're a member of a club. The rules of that club come first because it's a private agreement. And those agreements shift us outside of the public, which is where our legislation and our statutes lie. So that's a good example of why people would become a member, is to have those benefits of the club, the membership, the private members association, any of that. It does give us those are the rules that we abide by. As long as we do it in the terms as laid out by the association, club, or membership, then we're all good. We're clear. The legislation does not apply. And that's evident with how many footy players do we see punching each other out in the field. If you or I were to do that, D, we'd be charged.
Yeah.
But they're a member of a club. It's okay. A boxer can get in the ring and punch absolute crap out of each other. It's all by consent, by the rules of their membership. It's okay. It's not illegal then because the rules of that private members agreement or club or whatever association they're part of say that that's okay under these circumstances. So those are then the rules that they live by and are governed by. We're
Mm.
doing the same thing, just a little bit differently to cover us for legal issues. We're still lawful. Again, I'm not promoting anarchy. We still have to be responsible and operate with a high level of honour and integrity. And to not cause harm, loss, damage, or injury is basically the very simple way of putting that. And if we do again, we provide the remedy. So the
Mm.
rules of these membership, these associations and clubs, etc., are different. For example, another one that you can't hold a firearm unless you're a member of a shooting club or a pistol club or a hunters club.
Mm.
get your license and your tickets. But if you've got membership to an association, well, then those association rules apply above and beyond that of the legislation. So
Mm.
we're creating better rules via the PMA for the benefit of our members. And this works across the field. This isn't just a system for running a business through, for example. This is a lifestyle. And it's got to be a conscious choice that we make to actively embody that and live that. So we can have that practical remedy in the face of corruption and government overreach, where we have our own government, our own system of governance, which is our PMA.
Yeah. So just to summarize, you have created a PMA which people can join, and it's a private agreement between you and the group of people that have joined this PMA. Whatever's listed in that PMA applies to all the people in there, and that's separate from the public sector, I guess.
Correct. Absolutely. It's a private contract. Now, the PMAs weren't created with, under, or in accordance with any statutes or legislation. Now,
Yeah.
because the statutes and legislation didn't create it, they don't get the authority over it. Same as our God created man, man created government. It works the same. We've created this, therefore we have the authority, not those who are. It's no secret the government doesn't have our best interest at heart. They've overplayed the hand the last few years, and that's become quite evident for everyone. So, what do we do about it? Well, we create our own system,
Mm.
just like they did to us. We're all equal before the law. Why aren't we creating our own system that actually benefits we, the people,
Mm.
and doing it properly?
Yeah, I love that. And you don't have to be in Melbourne. You could be anywhere and you can join that association sort of thing.
Set up your own depending on what your needs are. What I encourage people to do is create your own. Once you create your own, then you're in charge of the rules that you consent to live by and to be governed by. And that's an individual choice. So these aren't a cookie cutter thing that we send out as an email or anything either, D. These are individualized as part of the process when we help set up and create these for people. Part of the fees are there's a paid session included in our fees for that. Come
Mm.
and speak to one of the teams so we can help you set that up and individualize it and tailor it to your specific needs. You're
Yeah.
going to have different wants and needs for what you want the PMA to be able to do and how you want to operate it to what I might have. So
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to have the same cookie cutter, here you go. It's just not feasible for individuals when we're all very individual and different with different needs and wants. So that's another factor that's got to be considered when setting these PMAs up is has to be individualized for the individual, for their members that they're looking to have part of their association, whether it be allied health, gardening, or construction, or whatever it is that you're into.
Yeah.
Um, must benefit your members, and we've got to have some sort of a humanitarian thing in there. We've got to be doing some good for others. It's not just about us. Uh,
Mm.
it's what are we doing to help? What are we contributing? And we can do so without the overreach of government oversight to be able to assist our fellow man, so to speak, in a far better way without that overreach.
If someone like has a business or an income stream, can that be moved across to be under the umbrella of a PMA, or do they need to create their own?
But if you're running your own business or you've got a income stream or a project that you're looking at, absolutely set up your own PMA and you can run it under that. Now, some industries might need some form of a hybrid version because they still need to have a foot in the public domain while we operate largely in the private. And that's quite easy to do. It's as simple as, look, today I'm wearing my private hat because I'm going to be operating in the private tomorrow. I've got, whatever work on that I need to be in the public. So I'm just going to shift over here and put my public hat on while I do that. Now, the only key there is that we can't mix the two. We can't be operating in public and private at the same time for the same thing.
Mm.
But we can choose because we have the rights to choose which way and which world we're going to operate in. So for a hybrid business, as we call them, some people can set these up and you can slowly transition more and more of your business, which we don't refer to as in the private, it's more projects and other things. You can transition those projects across to the private and slowly shift out. We can still keep that one foot over here in the public for when we need it, but it's
Mm.
our choice when we use it. It's our rights to choose. And it's a big point that I make to a lot of people when I'm talking about these, D, that if there's no choice, then it's not a right.
Mm.
We have the right to choose. It's one of our basic rights, the rights to choose to contract, which
Mm.
also includes, of course, our rights to choose not to contract. And then, of course, we have our rights to associate freely, which also must therefore include our rights to choose not to associate. So if you're not a member of our PMA, or if you've set up your own PMA and I'm not a member, D, I might have a hard time communicating with you or exchanging of any goods or services because I haven't transitioned to the private with you to make use of the benefits you're offering to your members privately. So any business can do that regardless of what industry you're in. It just takes time and a bit to learn and education. We offer all that through Warrior Law with our team to help train people on how to do that properly and lawfully so that we can move forward in the direction we want, again, without that government overreach and oversight. The PMAs have been used around the world for a long time.
Mm.
But we're just going on the principle that if we're all equal before the law, why aren't we doing this too?
Mm. So with the hybrid model, for example, say if I'm a naturopath and I have to deal with people in the public, but then I also need to deal with people in the private, then you'd recommend me having a hybrid model PMA.
Well, we don't really call it a hybrid model, it's a PMA. You're just going to operate it in a hybrid fashion.
Okay.
You're trying to, for you, say, with your naturopathy work, the bulk of your clients would have to become a member of your PMA first for you to offer any private services to them. You
Mm.
can do membership for $1 for the year. No one's going to complain about paying $1. If you're $100 for a session, for example, D, when you invoice them for $99 for the session and $1 for membership.
Mm.
As long as they're a member, then they get the benefits of what the PMA is offering. Now, you may have some clients who don't understand this, who are still fast asleep or uncomfortable with it. That's fine. You run it through the normal public parameters then in order to still be able to do business and commerce with that in the public. Again, you get the choice as to which venue or arena you're operating in, public or private, for what. But what you can't do is mix the two. Like if I come to you for a client, you couldn't bring me in from the public to do all this stuff and then say, oh, and I need you to pay the PMA for the
Mm.
service. Well, I need to be a member to make the benefit of those services to which you're offering.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's just a public transaction with a member of the public, which is all recorded and logged and taxed and all the rest of it. So this is again one of the beauties of doing that in the private. We can't avoid taxes, but we can certainly help to minimize them a lot with a properly done PMA and some proper education on how to actually operate one.
Yeah. So with that being said, PMAs can they hold assets?
No,
Oh.
they're like a private foundation or association in that regard where they can't actually hold assets. So you can't register your car or your property to a PMA. It's an association. As a general rule, they do not and cannot hold assets. We use trust for that sort of thing if people want some security there. It does work a bit differently. But we can transition your business dealings to projects and project management in the private under a properly done PMA.
Hmm. Okay. And what's the difference between a PMA and a basic foundation or a simple association?
Well, look, the private foundation stuff has been heavily targeted in recent years, especially in Australia.
Mm.
A lot of people who have had private foundation accounts have had them shut down, or restricted, or frozen.
Mm.
So what we've done the last couple of years is we don't do private foundations anymore. We do private associations. They basically work the same as a private foundation, just we don't call them that. It's an association instead, which under a PA, your associates get the benefits of that private association. But what I've found with the PA versus a PMA, the PMA has a much wider scope for lifestyle, where the PA I've found is more for your day-to-day business runnings and cash flow. And too many people are trying to how do I put it, use the PA setup, the private association foundation setup, purely as a tax haven without coming good on what they're supposed to be doing with these things as to why they've been targeted. So look, the PAs can be really good for some people for operating your business through that private thing with your associates to help minimize some of your taxes and to be a little bit outside of it. But I wanted to offer more than that for people rather than just how to operate a business, which is a lifestyle choice. And the PMA actually governs all areas and aspects of our life. And the PA is more for our commerce and business transactions. So it depends on how far are people wanting to go. For me personally, I'd rather establish something that is a lifestyle choice rather than a business choice. And for me, that's my take on it. My perspective there, D, is the main difference between the two. The PMAs just have a little bit more scale and scope, from what I've found. And that's not to say there aren't some good PAs out there. But the PMA that I've spent the last couple of years working on this, and there's many years of research and experience that have gone into creating this in a proper manner for people that is lawful. It does actually have that protective real life remedy included in these articles. I've found some, how do I put this politely, some discrepancies in our federal law that actually recognise our international laws, covenants, and treaties, and therefore our international rights as living beings, as recognised on the international law arena. And the fact that some of these are actually included in our federal law means that we can make benefit of that here for our members, for our own PMAs, and have a lawful PMA that operates outside of the legislation and statutes, but is still lawful and recognised by the legislation and statutes as that.
That's awesome. So it's, I guess, enforceable in a way. And if something was to happen, you can explain it all through the legislation.
We don't even need to, the legislation recognises what we've done. We don't have to explain it via the legislation. And look, we go back to our boxing, martial art, and our footy clubs.
Mm.
They're allowed to do that because they are part of a club and they were doing club or association things, actions, business, whatever at the time. Therefore, the rules of that covers them, not the legislation. We're doing the same thing, just our footy field, so to speak, is life, not just on the field or at the footy clubhouse. So we got to apply that differently. And like the footy clubs and boxing clubs are a great way of explaining that to people. How do they get away with doing what they do to each other? Because they're part of a members association or a private club that has its own set of rules,
Yeah.
which they agree and consent to. Well, we've done the same. We've just done it a bit broader so it can actually cover all areas and aspects of our life. So it's a system of governance for life and lifestyle as opposed to just business or commerce or just when you're on the footy field or in the boxing ring. It covers all areas of our lives and all aspects of, so that we can enjoy that freedom that we're all born with.
That's great. So if another tyrannical moment comes along and they want to mandate, experimental injections, we can just have our own rules.
Our own rules that say, look, as a member of the association, our rules don't enforce that. Now, I've heard stories of some people wanting to set up PMAs where they've actually wanted that sort of thing as part of the PMA. Look, each to their own, not my place to judge here, D. I'm with you. I'm like, what? But it's up to you as to the rules that you want to set to be governed by. And then it's up to your members whether or not they agree and consent to those rules. If they
And
don't join up, don't be a member.
say, obviously, like, with all the mandates that they passed and things that they legislated, does the PMA kind of, if there's a conflict there, does the PMA override that, if that makes sense?
Especially if the PMA was set up first. Our old maxim of law, first in time, first in law.
Hmm.
So if we were set up first, then yep. If you set up your PMA after all that, well, it might be a bit trickier, but you're still a member. You're still outside of it. But it's a lot easier to do if it's done prior. And I say this all the time, D. Contest is better than protest. We contest before it happens. We protest after the fact. Protest is a lot more difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know you're doing like a lot of stuff with the UCC. How's the PMA different to the UCC?
Well, look, there are two different areas we're playing in. The PMA is to cover the living. The UCC is for the dead, for your fictitious man of straw, for this all caps name, this person, creature of statute. The person with the all caps name is what we call an ens legis creature at law, something that derives its existence entirely from the law, legal fiction, or the statutes. Now, it's not where we derive our existence from, D.
Mm.
So then it raises the question, going back to our God-man government frame, how is it these statutes have authority over we, the people, and the living? The short answer is they don't. But what they do have authority over is the person, this fictitious creature of statute that wasn't created by God or nature, sometimes even referred to by the courts, which is hilarious, as a natural person. Now, persons aren't created naturally. It's an oxymoron with banking integrity and sovereign citizen. These words simply don't belong together. They cannot exist. It's not there. So when we break that down for there, the UCC is a way of when I explain this to people, the UCC1 financial filing statement is basically a lien or a caveat, if you like, that we're putting over the all caps name and the estate. And we're doing so as the creditor and the beneficiary. Because over time, thanks to the SESQV Act of 1666, we used to be the creditor and the beneficiary. And in 1666, under the creation of the SESQV Act, they switched all that around on us. Somehow this fictitious person who cannot see, hear, or speak and has no arms, feet, or legs, is not alive, became the creditor and the beneficiary. And we got lumped with debtor and trustee. So the UCC process that we help people through helps undo that and switch it back to the way it should be, where the straw man or this man of straw, this fictitious person, they're the debtor and the trustee, and we maintain the position of creditor and beneficiary.
Mm.
True, it's only we, the living, that can create and produce anything of value.
Mm.
That's what gives us credit, not debt. We
Makes
can't do that. A person, for example, cannot come and build you a house or a garage or a shed or a brick fence or anything. The living has to do that. And they use that life force living energy, which we're the only ones with any equity in, of course, to create or produce things of value in order to earn credit, not debt. The
Mm.
debt belongs to this fictitious person thingy. So when we do our UCC1, we're putting a lien over that person. So that if there's any claims brought against we the living, we're held harmless and indemnified courtesy of our hold harmless indemnity agreement. We're held harmless and indemnified against any and all claims, damages, lawsuits, expenses whatsoever by this person, because that's what they're charging, not the man or the woman. Yet we have the credit here. So if you're in court, for example, and you've got all your UCC and they ask, how do you plead? Well, I'm not here to make a plea. I'm here to make a claim for damages. I'm the beneficiary and the creditor. Any fees should be going to me. It's my credit and value that my life force living energy created that you guys are trading on, but you don't have any equity in that because it's not your life force living energy. So we place a lien over it via the UCC with some other docs that go with it in order to protect us from such fraudulent claims against the living, when the UCC is really a way of protecting the dead fictitious persona, and the PMA is a way of looking after the living.
Right. So could you use them kind of in parallel with each other where the PMA, protects the members or the in the private, and then the UCC protects you in the public and your assets and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So yeah, your assets will be listed in the security agreement. So you've got a lien over there. So let's say Revenue New South Wales turn up at your place, D, and say, D, you haven't paid your fines. We're going to take your car, and we're going to take the car in lieu of your unpaid fines. And you can say, yep, that's fine, guys. You can take the car, not a problem. But there is the small matter of my lien over my estate and assets that needs to be settled first. Now, again, first in time, first in law, because my claim existed first. I need to be paid first.
Mm.
Now, we usually put a pretty hefty lien of around $1 billion over the estate, which should cover anyone for any debts brought against them. So once that's been paid, yeah, you can have the car. Now, obviously, they're not going to want to pay you out that money for the lien, so they tend to go away and withdraw their claim, knowing that yours has to be settled and paid first. And this is done under international law. I have zero faith in Crown, Commonwealth, or our government here because they've done nothing but rot the people since they came to this country. So
Mm.
I'm going to go into the international arena and do it there, where these international laws and standards are actually recognised. Hence why we do through UCC for that, not the PPSR, because our Private Property Securities Registrar, governed by our PPSA, the Private Property Securities Act, our government here can amend your filings and change whatever they like on there without telling you. They can't do that when we file internationally and do it under uniform commercial codes. So
Mm.
this is why I've gone for that international, because I've lost any and all faith in our so-called government here in this country. They've done nothing but shaft the people and our tribes since the day they got here. And I just don't want to be a part of that. So I'm going to go into the national arena where we have some more serious and stringent rules, laws, and regulations which actually govern the government to tell them how they can and can't govern we, the people. And that's what we're using to enforce our PMA, the UCCs. A lot of what I do is coming from that space. They're
Mm.
inalienable God-given rights and they're recognised under international laws, treaties, and covenants. Let's use them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because often when we try to do things within our system, it's just they they tend to find ways to just override things, and I've noticed that in our kind of legal system. So I totally understand why you want to rely on the solid foundations of, I guess, the the worldly way the things are run, because it's commercial law in all.
It's the worldly way that things are supposed to be run.
Yeah.
And governments around the world, including here in Australia, ignore a lot of this until we bring it to their attention. And they go, "Oh, well, we forgot about that. And yes, I believe you might be correct." And they start doing backflips and chasing their tail to try and correct it. But they're relying on our fear and ignorance to not know, to
Yeah.
not have the courage or the spine to question them and to ask them, "Can you provide proof?" And as you've seen the last few years, Dee, they do not like to be questioned.
That's
And
true.
all we've done is, so how many people have been arrested and hauled out of their cars? Obviously, some of them have done it pretty poorly just for asking questions. It's
Mm,
not a crime.
yeah.
And that's reliant upon our very old maxim of law, which says that the onus or burden of proof lies on the one making the claim. If they're
Mm,
going to claim that you're a person, ask them to prove it. Ask for the evidence that supports their claim. If
mm.
I went around claiming, Dee, that you owed me $1 million, you'd laugh at me. You'd say, prove it. And I go, well, I can't, but well, I said so, so you owe me $1 million. That would never stand up in court. I could never enforce that. How is that different to what's being done to we the people?
So for those who want to learn more about the PMA or want to find out what the best method is for their situation or issue or business or whatever, do you recommend them to reach out to you guys and you can have that chat with them?
Absolutely. Look, everyone's going to come from a different place when they want to learn about this, even if you've been studying this stuff for quite some time. Um, and I've put the last, very solid amount of time over the last couple of years into doing it. And the reason I created our own one I was really dismayed at the substandard level of most of the PMAs I've seen getting around in Australia and to a degree internationally as well. They just don't offer that actual real remedy. They haven't written themselves out of the statutes and legislations properly. So you haven't achieved anything with some of these other PMAs. And don't get me wrong, there's probably some good ones out there too, just I haven't seen them. And I'm not saying that anyone's work's terrible here either. Each their own, guys. Do your homework before you do this sort of thing. Work out if the mob you're going to for PMA is a right fit for you or not. If not, well, come talk to us at Warrior at Law. We believe we've done a cracker of one that works in any geographical location, in any jurisdiction, and in any part of the world, especially if it's a UN or a Commonwealth country, then absolutely. These are little things that you've got to look at, guys, and what are you wanting to do with the PMA? And this is why anyone who wants one, yes, please book in, do a consult with one of the team here so we can go through what you're wanting to do with that and offer you some advice and some tools on how you can actually achieve that and what's involved in setting one of these up, creating your bank accounts to go with, and all the rest of it. It's not just here's a piece of paper. There's a little bit more to it than that, which we go over when we do our consults with people, and we really want people to learn how to do this for themselves because
Mm.
that's the whole thing of self-determination and self-governance. We need to do it ourselves, and we need to demonstrate that we're capable of doing so in order to run something like a PMA.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks, Ed. I just want to get into the UCC a bit, into that a bit, because I do think that people are getting a little bit confused and a bit of a few misconceptions with that. First one being that people believe that they can access their trust and pay bills. Can you explain that? Explain what the purpose of the and the benefits of the UCC is and whether that is actually possible or not.
All right, look, there are ways of offsetting debt once you've done your UCC filing, but it's not the actual filing, so to speak, that actually does that for you.
Mm.
Now, I'm going to probably get a lot of comments on this one, Dee, but I'm yet to find any evidence of this mythical SESQV trust that has billions of dollars in it for all of us, courtesy of our birth certificate. Now, it's not to say there isn't a trust set up behind the birth certificate. Excuse me, the driver's license, passport, tax file number, ABN. I've looked up the QSIPs on all of this for myself. I know they're there, they exist. You can look it up once you learn how to do so. And you can look up these details of all of this. This is my perspective on things and my take, and we'll probably get a heap of comments going, oh, don't care. This is just my take on things that I've been quite successful with. So I don't believe there to be this mythical overarching CQV trust. What I believe has occurred is there are multiple of these as a testamentary or constructive trust set up under the CQV Act of 1666 to offset any debts or claims. It's a bond, it's a surety, it's an accommodation party, the person for we the living to offset. Again, we don't produce or create things of value to earn debt. We do that to earn credit. So where's the debt come from? Who owns the debt? I'll give you a clue. It's not us.
Mm.
Yeah, it goes back to our person, our man of straw, this debtor, trustee, ens legis creature of statute. So for anyone who thinks you're going to do your UCC filing and magically have keys to the kingdom, I laugh and I just tell people it's not the case. If it was that easy to do, D, I'd be doing these calls from my own privately owned tropical island and have a harem of lovely ladies feeding me peeled grapes all day. It's not how it works. It's not that easy to do. And there is a lot of learning once you've done your UCC as to then what you want to do with it. It's a solid foundation building block for moving forward with some protection of your dead. And again, the PMA protects us in the living, and the UCC covers our dead legal persona entity there. So we've got to cover both worlds. So we want to operate in the living and the private. Yep, that's our PMAs, which again we've spent the last couple of years working on. And I know what I've done is watertight. Anyone I've shown it to has been quite amazed with it. We've even got some of the international guys who are very knowledgeable on PMA start and refer people outside of America to us because we don't have a Marbury Madsen case here.
Mm.
We don't have a Bill of Rights. That's why it took me a lot of time and nearly 2 years of research to establish how can we incorporate this, have it recognised by Australian law without it being under Australian law. And that's something I don't believe anyone else has managed to do in Australia with the PMA setups that are being offered currently. So again, that's to look after us in the living. But we've got to cover our ass over here in the public with the dead as well. So we've got to be able to do both. And that's what the UCC does. That looks after our dead fiction thing there. And again, guys, it's a lien over the estate. Now, we don't do it for the money. I'm not interested in the billions of dollars or whatever's sitting there. Accessing that is near on impossible. They've made that very difficult for most. And there's a lot of myths getting around that you can do all sorts of stupid shit with your bills and send them back and they get paid. There's a lot of hype at the moment going around online about bills of exchange, etc. And look, some of that's actually partially correct. Yes, the utility bill, the fine, whatever it is you're sent, isn't offered a contract, and the payment slip on the bottom is in fact a check for the same amount they're asking for. That's all absolutely correct. What we can't go doing though, D, is doing silly things like scrawling all over the bill with arrows and writing everywhere, and it looks like a 3-year-old scrawled on it with crayon and then send it back. Like if I receive one of them, I'd laugh and send it back with a reminder notice. So a lot of people aren't really having a great deal of success with doing it that method. People want to learn more. One, get in touch with us at Warrior at Law, speak to one of the team. We have other ways of offsetting debt, of course, promissory notes and other things, which are legal tender under our Bills of Exchange Act of 1909. There are other ways of offsetting that and dealing with that as well. We can't actually pay debt. It can only be offset or discharged. So to discharge it is where these constructive testamentary trusts set up behind everything come into play. And remember, they've already taken their money. But then they send you the bill as the trustee to get you to balance the books that they've gone and played with. This is part of the rort here. Now, the other one, just to address quickly here, had a few people in recent weeks asking, how do we administer our own trust? How do we administer our UCC? And I laugh and say, well, how are you administering something? How are you going to be the administrator to administrate something you're not in possession of or holding? How does that work? I can't administer something I don't have access to, that I'm not holding or in possession of. How am I going to administer that? I don't even know where it is. I can't administer that. Now, to administer it, I'd have to be holding it. Now, if I'm holding it, I'm now holding it for the benefit of someone else, putting me in the position of trustee. And this is where people are getting a lot of this stuff confused, and they're getting into trouble challenging the courts with, in my perspective, less than accurate info on how that actually works. If you're the holder, you're the trustee. You're holding that for the benefit of someone else. You can't be the beneficiary then. And we can't be trustee and beneficiary of the same trust that we collapse it. No one gets paid. The establishment doesn't want that either. Yeah? This is why they ask us to hold a license or a birth certificate or a tax file number or an ABN. You're the holder. You're the trustee. It's that simple. You're holding it for the benefit of another. You cannot be the beneficiary under those terms. And if you're holding it, you're not holding the estate. So we're lumped with the trustee position, but without access to the accounts to administer it. We need to remove ourselves from all that and just keep it simple: creditor and a beneficiary, or creditor and the executive beneficiary. Because again, we can't administer things we're not in possession of or holding. And
Mm-hmm.
if we are, we're the trustee. That's why a lot of the guys in this field are returning, are handing in licenses and birth certificates, giving it all back to the government and saying, this is yours. I don't want it. And again, it's not your license. That license belongs to the state. You're holding it for their benefit. You're the trustee. And this is how they trick us. This is a big part of why a lot of people get this wrong when they're challenging the courts and the establishment with this stuff. One, they believe they can administer their own accounts and trust, which I just have a giggle at. But two, you're holding all this stuff. Unless you're sending all that back. And so, yes, we are technically the beneficiaries. Absolutely. That is correct. But you've got to prove it. And then you've got to have them recognize and acknowledge that.
Mm.
Therein lies the trick. That's the art. This is what we help people learn, is how to hold position and stand your ground. But before you can do that, you've got to learn who and what you are.
Yeah.
And it's not until you've got that in here that a lot of this isn't going to work for you. If you're just doing it to get out of a fine or to avoid or minimize your taxes, you're coming at this from the wrong mindset. And if you're chasing the money, this mythical golden carrot of billions of dollars, and believe that you can file a UCC one and access that, you've got a lot of learning to do. It is absolutely not how it works. I explained a little bit of that and some of the pitfalls and errors that people are making with how they perceive all of this stuff. And look, learn the terms for a trust, guys. If you're going to go around claiming that you're a beneficiary or a benefactor, a grantor, a settlor, an administrator, a trustee, an executor, learn what these terms are and how they apply to trust law. And again, if we're challenging the establishment or they've challenged us and we're responding, stop making statements and start asking better questions. When we ask better questions, we get better answers. If you're not getting the answers you're looking for, it's because you didn't ask the right questions.
It's a lot to get your head around, but yeah,
It is.
we have to ask the right questions, like you said.
We're asking the right questions, then they make the claim in response. Once again, the onus or burden of proof lies on the one making the claim. So if they're claiming that you're a person before this court, well, Your Honour, can you prove I'm a person? I can quite easily prove I'm a man of living flesh and blood. Can you, in fact, prove that I'm a person? Where is the evidence to support the claim?
Mm-hmm.
So again, we don't go in there saying, I'm a living man, you've got no authority and jurisdiction over me, because they'll just haul you out. You do that with the police, they'll smash your window and drag you out of the car. Ask the question. If they're not answering, then ask better questions. Usually they'll get rattled and they'll say and do something really stupid for us, in which case they've just made a claim. They now need to provide proof of that claim. Otherwise, again, it's like me saying, do you owe me $1 million? I
Yeah.
can't prove that. I didn't lend you any money. I haven't done any amazing goods or services worth $1 million to you. It's just a claim, one that I can't prove. Therefore, I can't enforce it.
The beauty of it is that a lot of these authorities and police officers don't know much about the law, so they can easily say something in your favor.
And that happens a lot. As I say, everybody, guys, make sure you get your phones out, record them, send the video somewhere else, upload it somewhere. So if they take your phone, you don't lose the footage, because quite often they get deleted. Ask them to turn their body worn camera on too before anything happens. Just want to make sure we're all safe. Can you please activate your body worn camera? I'm going to activate my phone. We're all going to record everybody. Everybody's nice and safe now. And then the video evidence may or may not be used as evidence later on down the track, depending on how this interaction goes.
Mm.
Leave it up to them. They can decide which way we're going to go. We're not here to fight with them, do you? We just don't want to participate. If you're fighting with someone, you're going to get hurt. I don't care how good you are. Why not just step out of the line of fire and not be in the line of fire? You're not taking damage then. We don't have to participate. Again, we have the right to choose.
Mm.
And this is where a lot of people forget, oh, but I've been dragged into court. Well, yeah, go in there and ask questions, guys. And yes, you can use things like your PMAs and UCCs to not participate in such arenas. But it takes a bit of time to learn how to do it properly. And you need to, again, learn who and what you are and your standing in order to be able to vocalize that, because they will test you. They will question you. And if they think for a moment that, oh, you've watched some YouTube video of some crazy bearded bloke talking to a naturopath, and you don't actually know what you're doing, they're going to be all over you. Just as an example, dude, you can't watch one of these videos that you've done with one of your other guests, the ones that I do. You've got your white belt. Congratulations. Now you're going to go into the magistrate's court and deal with a magistrate who's been on the bench for 20 years. You're dealing with a black belt and you've just got your white belt. And don't take a genius to work out that's not going to end well for you. You do not enter black belt tournaments when you're on your white belt. You learn.
I definitely do not recommend anyone to go into a courtroom if they've only watched our videos.
And
And
practice.
yeah.
Like
And
go to court,
I
practice. It's on COVID fines, parking
yeah.
tickets, traffic infringements. Guys, these are legal for a fee. You're not going to jail over it. The worst case scenario, if you cock up on a COVID fine or a traffic infringement or parking fine or one of these minor little legal for a fee, as I call them, offences, the worst case scenario is some idiot's going to hand you a piece of paper that says you owe some other idiot some money. And you can pay them off with a promissory note, bills of exchange, $10 a week, whatever. Whoop-de-doo. It's of little to no consequence to most of us, when we look at it that way.
Mm.
So the UCC can help us with that, and the PMA helps us with lifestyle, an
Yeah.
actual system of governance that we consent to live by. And we can do, look, there's many international, as I said, laws, treaties, and covenants. One that allows us to use the UCC. Now, on the UCC, quickly, a lot of people say, oh, it's all bullshit, mate. It doesn't work in Australia. It's only for America.
Mm.
Now, go on the UCC website, the Washington Department website there, and it'll ask you for country of filing. Now, when you open up the little prompt for the country of filing, nearly every country in alphabetical order from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe is listed. Why
Mm.
do our major banks here all have UCC filings? Why is Australia on the list for countries that use and recognise it to file from? It's not because it doesn't work here. It's because people don't know how to make it work here.
There you go. Otherwise, it wouldn't be listed.
Why do our four major banks all have UCC filings? It's not because it doesn't work here. Why they're doing this is a little tip, and who wants to learn about more UCC stuff. I learned the bulk of what I learned about that from studying the US financial markets, because for them, that's their bread and butter. They use it every day for a multitude of purposes. So that's what I studied to learn about the UCC, is the US financial and lending markets. We're going to cover both fronts, though, do you? We cover the dead with the UCC and the living with our PMA, and then we're covered on both fields. And then we can choose if we want to operate in this public fiction area with the dead, our UCC covers us. But when we want to operate as the living in the private, we've got our PMA that covers us there.
So if someone has had their property taken from them and they actually have a proper UCC filing, how can they enforce that?
Well, it depends if the UCC filing was done before the claimant they lost the property for, first in time, first in law. So if let's say you had, which happens, we've had councils putting caveats over people's properties
Mm.
for less than 10 grand worth of unpaid rates over a couple of years. Now, if you did your UCC after that, their claim is the first in line. It's like waiting in line at the bakery is another way of explaining that, D. If I've got number 3 and you've got number 7, I'm going to get served first.
Mm.
So who put the caveat or the lien in first, you get paid first. First in time, first in law. Again, contest versus protest. So get your ducks, even if you've got no issues. And, most of us, I'd like to think at least that majority of the people I deal with, like yourself, D, they're not crims. We're not out doing the wrong thing.
Mm.
Just want some protection from the overreach of government, and we want to be left alone to live a peaceful and honourable life. We're not causing harm, loss, damage, or injury. We're not out there robbing banks. We're not selling drugs to kids. We're not thieving stuff. We're not running around out in the streets beating people up and vandalising crap, because we all know that's the wrong thing to do. So we
Mm.
need to shift this focus from is it legal or illegal to is it right or wrong? And one of my favourite sayings, the slave asked, is it legal? The free man asked, is it right? And sometimes doing the right thing is not always the easy thing to do, but if it's the right thing to do, then our moral compass needs to kick in and we do the right thing, regardless of what the legislation might say.
Say if you've got a proper UCC filing, and then after that, your property has been taken, how would you be able to enforce it?
Well, again, contest versus protest, you need to do that prior to. Have they been informed? No one knows you've done a UCC filing. When you do it, the government here is not notified. Look out, Dee's filed a UCC. We can't play with it no more. You need to inform them and instruct them.
Mm,
And that's got to be done prior to.
okay. Makes
Contest, not protest. So doing it, applying all this after the fact is really tricky.
mm,
Not to
okay.
say it can't be done, but it's quite difficult. Again, contest, not protest. You want to get in first. So if you've got issues with councils and stuff there and you're not paying rates, which again, if you've got issues there, get in touch with the team. We do have some remedy available for people dealing with such matters. One of my biggest advices to people is put a caveat over your own property before someone else does. And
Mm,
then if they do go pear-shaped, you're getting paid first. You're not losing out. Now, what's happened in some parts, the councils have done a acquisition of property for unpaid rates. Now, the unpaid rates are a very small percentage of the value of the property, but they've done a warrant or a seizure or a warrant of possession or a caveat over it for the unpaid rates. People haven't quite known how to deal with that properly with the courts. They haven't responded to the paperwork. They've then been in receipt of court orders. Council will take the property, they'll sell it at auction. Usually one of their friends or a mate on the insider will be there. They'll snuggle up the house for a very small percentage of what it's worth and then sell it for what it is worth and capitalize on the profit.
mm,
So don't get caught out with these sneaky tricks. If you're dealing with councils, do it properly. Give them something to avoid caveats and the rest of it going ahead. We've got to be careful as to how we do that too for people wishing to challenge or question the councils as well. Again, we want to question them, not fight them, guys.
okay,
So
so moral of the story, you'd rather avoid getting it to the point where you're getting your property taken away because it's harder to deal with. But there is still remedy. Even in that process, it's just a bigger pain, a bigger, I guess, effort and battle.
a lot of paperwork back and forth and a lot of correspondence, but you want to nip this in the bud. You want to let them know very early on in the piece what the new terms and conditions are. And it largely depends on how you acquired the property. What did the contract say that you purchased the property under? A lot of conveyancers and solicitors will therefore include rates as part of that contract or the conveyancing deal. It's
Mm,
part of the contract you've signed. So again, read the fine print, guys.
mm,
I think I talked about this with you before, the fine print and terms and conditions, no one reads it. Like you go on Amazon and it says, do you agree with our terms and conditions? You want to buy something on Amazon, you click yes. No one reads their terms and conditions. Amazon's a great example. There's a clause in their terms and conditions, if anyone bothered to read them in detail. In case of a zombie apocalypse, they're not allowed to sell certain timber products. That's actually in the Amazon terms and conditions.
wow, I didn't know that.
So read the fine print. What have you agreed to? Again, contracts, contract law. You are contractually obligated. If you've signed and agreed to that contract, you're obligated to uphold your contractual obligations, as is the other party that signed the contract. Now, let's go back to my $1 million that you owe me again as an example here, Dee. Where's the contract? Did you agree to be contractually obligated to pay me $1 million for something I haven't done?
I did not.
So for me to enforce that, then, isn't it?
Okay. And so you're still doing UCC filings for people. Do you offer some sort of, I guess, courses on understanding the UCC?
Yes and no. Look, we brush over it with some of our webinars, the workshops that we have done in the past, which we've recorded and got online for people who want to watch at their own leisure. Um, Everyone's really different, and it's an ever changing and evolving space as well. So I've been a bit dubious to put out too much info as it can be quickly outdated. Even on the UCC website, in the last 2 years, there have been several, say 2, 3 years even, there have been several changes.
Mm,
3 to 5 years ago, you could put a copyright symbol after your name on their filing system. You're not allowed to do that no more. For a while, we could cut and paste it from elsewhere as long as it wasn't on their site to put the copyright in, but now it doesn't recognize that at all.
mm,
So I have to type it in. There's other ways of getting around doing that for people, of course, for proper use of grammar. But these are little subtle changes and different options for required fields of entry. They've changed over the last couple of years with it all as well. So
Mm.
you really need to be on top of the constant changes. And look, UCC is still run by a government department. Okay, it's not our government, but no government should be trusted. They change the rules and move the goalpost every 5 minutes on us. We need to be up to speed with those changes.
Mm.
It also depends on what people are wanting to learn. There are some things that I know are possible once you've got your UC filing, like other processes you can do with those documents. Some of those processes are things I can help people with. Some of them aren't. Now, if it's something I can't help with, happy to refer people to those who I know in the international field who are doing exactly that. So there is always remedy. There's always more than one way to skin a cat.
Mm.
I've got to work out what's going to work for you. Again, these processes need to be individualized, and the power's not in these, oh, I've got this amazing paperwork here. The power's you. And we get a lot of people coming to us wanting me to create the magic bullet, load it and fire it for them. And it's like, mate, you're the magic bullet, not the documents. It's you. It comes from in here.
Mm.
People really need to realize this to know that. And once you really know who and what you are, and you get that in here in the core of your being, they just tend to leave you alone anyway, because they
Mm.
know that you know. There's no point. It's like trying to have an argument with someone who walks away, D. Like if you said we're going to have an interview with Zev tonight and I didn't show up, it wouldn't be much of an interview, would it? You need to participate for it to occur. Again, if you're trying to have an argument with me and I just bugger off and walk away, there's no argument to be had, is there? I'm not participating. I'll fight with someone if they wander off, they walk away, if they don't get in the ring.
Yeah.
No, so if they really want to do this with us, this is my take. I'm not getting in your ring. You really want to have a fight with me, that's fine. But you come over here and do it in my ring with my rules. I stand a half chance then. And it's by consent. It's different. We don't want to be on board their ship. They come on board our ship where we're the captain.
Mm.
We set the rules that we engage with all this by, whether it be by UCC or a PMA. We look after both the dead and the living, because the way the world has become so corrupt with a lot of the stuff they're pushing, we need that real life remedy to be able to be practical and effective.
Mm.
And so having yourself covered on both fronts, very, very handy way to do things there. And, again, the PMA for me, that's our system of governance, which
Mm.
we can do. We've got some of one of my most favourite cases of all time. It's a very old one from 1796. And it was done in the North Carolina Supreme Court. It's called Cruden versus Neal. If anyone watching wants to look this up, it's Cruden versus Neal, Neale, 1796. Now, the famous quote from this very old case where it was stated, it said, therein every man is not bound to any laws except for the laws of nature, and that he cannot be bound to any institution formed by his fellow man without his consent. I need consent. It plays a massive part in our lawful and legal rights. A job without consent would be slavery, D. Sex without consent is rape. Business without consent is fraud or theft. We need consent.
Mm.
And it cannot be manufactured or implied. It must be given freely in the absence of duress or coercion. Because if you've agreed to something under duress or coercion or threats of menace, that agreement or contract is now null and void.
Yeah.
So consent plays a huge part in all this. And that's one of the strengths of the PMA is we actually consent to that.
It sounds like it covers all bases, like it's foolproof.
I've rewritten that PMA from scratch 4 times because I found holes in my own work, and I started again and again, again and again. And I've got to the point now where I can't actually poke any holes in my own work. I've shown it to friends of mine who are similar to what I do. They couldn't find holes in it either. That's when I went, right, I think I'm finally happy with this. It can be, I'm going to say, released to the public, but we don't do that. We release it to our private members. And that's part and parcel of it. The many years of research and work that's gone into that. That PMA is literally a culmination of almost 30 years of playing in the law arena. And everything I've learned, I've taken a bit from all of those experiences over the years and incorporated into our PMA. So I'm aware of the dodgy tricks that the governments will play with us. I'm aware of what they'll throw at us as to how we're able to negate that. You've got to know your enemy, so to speak. But I don't even consider them to be an enemy nowadays, D. They're just a bunch of idiots I don't associate with because I don't have to. I'm only choosing to associate with those who wish to be members of my private members association because I have the rights to associate, which includes my rights to choose not to associate as well.
Mm, I like that. And I know you mentioned before you with the UCC you got private plates and insurance. How's that all going? Is everything going well? Have others adopted this? Is it looking like it's a easy path to take, or is it quite challenging?
It's not an easy path to take. I'll be quite upfront and honest with everybody. There is a few extra steps. It's not just do your UCC and get plates. There's a few other steps and processes and documents that need to be completed, served, and sent. We want to be open and transparent. We must provide full discovery and disclosure, unlike what we're offered. We're trying to do the honourable thing and offer that. So
Mm.
there is a few extra steps for doing so. I've had those private plates on now for a little close on 18 months. Nothing. I've been through a couple of RBTs. I've site managed festivals where we've got a mountain of police on site. No one seemingly wanted to talk to me. The RBTs I've been through was just a couple of quick questions. I explained it's registered internationally under, privately under international law. I've got on my paperwork here. Just want to have a look. I can confirm that I am above board and legitimate with what I've done. I've got my insurance papers and everything. And they're like, no, mate, you're good. Off you go.
Mm.
Didn't want to know. Now, having said that, other people who have done this and may not have the same level of training and knowledge that I've acquired over many years have not been as successful and they've had a few issues, but they're happy to go to court and challenge all that. They haven't had their cars taken or anything. They're still traveling around.
Mm.
So it can be done, does require a bit of, again, guys, it doesn't work unless you know who and what you are in here. It's not the paperwork, it's you. The paperwork is our proof of claim. I was saying earlier, if we ask a stupid question, they give us a stupid answer, then they've made the claim. They have to provide the proof. The paperwork is our proof of what we're claiming.
I think we have to do a lot of meetings for personal development around this stuff, because you have to be really in your power when you're dealing with these people. Because if there is, if you question yourself or you have a moment of self-doubt, that'll backfire on you.
Jump on that in a heartbeat, D. If they see that you don't know that, they don't care about your paperwork. They'll go you in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, as you say, it starts within here and how you hold yourself and knowing who you are. That's the most important thing, and the rest will come out as it needs to because it's already in here.
It will come at the level that the individual is at to learn.
Mm,
That's what people say. Look, you've got a knack for teaching. I laugh. I'm not teaching. I'm helping people learn.
mm,
Otherwise, when I did a presentation or a workshop, everyone had learned the same thing. It's not the case because everybody's learning is a different stage and different level. They learn what they needed to learn at the time from that same info, which I'm not teaching. I'm just helping people learn. And everyone's going to learn in their own way. And the key is try and find how do individuals learn. So for a one-on-one, it's a bit easier. For a group situation, not everybody's going to learn the same thing in the same way. They're all going to take something different from that same presentation of information, if you like, because everyone's learning is at a different stage. They're all going to learn something different from the same info.
mm.
And
Yeah.
this is one of my favourite sayings and quotes, D, is that when people say, point. A lot of practice, a lot of trials, and a lot of errors as well. Even on my behalf, when I started doing this nearly 30 years ago, I wasn't successful. The courts were just bitch slapping me and steamrolling me guilty, next out. And I didn't understand or comprehend what was going on. So I learnt more. And as I learnt more, I got better at it to the point where that's not the case nowadays.
Mm.
But one of my favorite quotes around that is the master and the apprentice. And the difference between the master and the apprentice is that the master has failed more times than the apprentice has tried, because that's how we learn.
I like that. You always have really good quotes.
I read a lot, D, so
Tell. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just going to read some questions that people have requested. So the first one is, does Zev have a guide for banks and loans, how to get a home loan, but set it up from the get-go so that we are the beneficiary, not the trustee, and they can't turn it into a mortgage?
Yes and no. It really depends on what you're wanting to do. If you let the banks know that this is what you're about, there's a high chance they're not going to give you the loan in the first place. So there are some sneaky tricks the bank use with these. One of the important things is to make sure that you get copies of the original mortgage contract, because these are on sold and traded upon. And when you come years into your mortgage and go, I shouldn't be paying this because it's been traded on, the dividend should have come to me, it's my security instrument. Again, contest versus protest. So applying all this after the fact, asking questions, saying to the bank, well, I'm not paying your mortgage anymore until you do all of this, they'll take your house. Now, it might not be right, it might not be moral, it might not be just or even legal, doesn't stop them from doing it anyway. So there is a serious bit of learning on how to do that and get around that. And if you've signed a mortgage and you've got a copy of the contract, you are contractually obligated to fulfill your contractual obligations unless you can prove that they've breached on their terms, in which case he who breaches the contract holds the liability. Let's put it another way, D. I've come into you, you're a Telstra, and I'm not happy with my services with Telstra. Tell you guys are useless. I'm going to Optus. They've given me a better deal. And they say, that's fine, sir. You'd like to breach the contract, would you? You've got another 18 months with Telstra. And I go, yeah, but you guys are useless. I'm going to Optus. Well, sir, then you're breaching the contract. I'm now liable for the remaining terms of because I breached it. So he who breaches the contract holds the liability. So if you can catch the banks out on breaching on their terms or on necessarily true and correct or above board and valid, then there are some avenues there. But if you've signed a contract agreeing to do something and you breach that, you're liable for the terms. Yeah, if you can prove that the bank has breached it, then they're liable. Now,
Mm.
there are a lot of things about that with the bank. This is not something I can answer in a short question there. People are having serious questions about how to deal with mortgages and stuff. Get in touch with the team at Warrior Law. There are various options there that can be utilised to assist people with that and what to ask the banks. Again, we've got to ask the right questions and we won't get the right answers.
And how have you been going with your battles in court with councils? Any updates on the unlawful council rates or?
Look, some people have done better than others. It depends on where your learning's at. Look, I'm happy to talk to anyone who wants to learn a bit more about that. There are ways of going about doing that without getting yourself flagged, without caveats being put over the property and stuff. And it really depends on what's already been done. Because some people have sent some pretty silly letters and notices to the council, basically just saying this at them and I'm not paying you without asking for anything in return or any evidence or facts or proof of claim. There is a way to go about doing that. Conditional acceptance, the demand notice of demand, for example, asking for that. Ask them for where the head or source of power or authority is derived from. Which tier of government are you purporting to be a part of, the executive, legislative, or judiciary? They're none of the above. I mean, as you know, Dee, we had two failed referendums to try and alter the constitution here in this country to recognise councils as a further legitimate tier of government. Both referendums, much like our bullshit voice one we had not long ago, were shot down in flames. So the councils aren't recognised by the constitution as a legitimate tier of government. Therefore, guess what? They're not a legitimate tier of government. So where does their authority come from? Now, that's a great question to ask them.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence for councils being unlawful.
Councils will often send a thing, which we've had from a few clients. They've sent an excerpt from the Constitution that says that the states and the Parliament under the parliaments of the state, I can't remember the quote exactly, but it says they have the bit they always leave out is a few very important words in that sentence in our Constitution, which says subject to this Constitution. And whenever the council send their quotes about the parliaments and the states may make laws for the good governance of the people, they
Mm.
leave out that very important part of that sentence, of that section of our constitution that says subject to this constitution. It's conveniently omitted whenever they send a quote from the constitution. And most people will look at that and go, oh, it's from the constitution. It must be legit. Guys, we're not going to take anything these lying thieves say at face value. Do your own research, look it up yourself, and you will see they omit the words and they change it round to suit their own needs. It does not match what's in the Constitution or the legislation a lot of the time.
Mm. They just pick
Again,
and choose little parts that, you know, back their argument, but it's not the whole part, I guess.
exactly. They always leave out those four words that say subject to this Constitution, which they're not.
Mm. Yeah.
It falls apart there. There's a whole heap of stuff I could go on. We'd probably have another chat another night about councils and why they're not legitimate entities. There's a lot to explain and unpack there, Dee, but that's the general gist of it. They're unconstitutional, therefore unlawful. They're not recognised by the Constitution as a
Mm.
legitimate tier of government. Therefore, they can't act as so. They're a company or corporation masquerading as tier of government, which again is prohibited under our Constitution. We've got High Court case law that verifies all that. The very famous Queensland Rail case from the 8th of April, where Queensland Rail lost that case for similar reasons. They were deemed to be a corporation under the Corporations Act due to their ABN, ACN. Therefore, they weren't registered to the state. They registered to the Commonwealth under the Corporations Act, federal legislation, federal jurisdiction. Yet they're attempting to apply state laws. And there was a massive conflict in that Queensland Rail case between the state and federal law. Therefore, Section 109 of our Constitution applied and put them into federal where they couldn't do anything.
Mm.
Councils are in the same boat. That's a great case for anyone to look up there. Queensland Rail, 8th of April 2014, I think it was, and it was against all the allied services contractors and electrical contractors. The case was about their work conditions. So have a read, just quote the end result. B, if you're going to use any case law, learn the case. So if you're questioned, you can actually talk about what it was rather than, oh, but it was ruled, but you don't know what happened in the case. Read the case.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really handy one. So someone's asked, can you buy under alloidal title or create alloidal title in Australia?
Yes, no. Right. First of all, I'd like to know if the person who, not the person, the man or woman who sent that in, um, is aware of what an allodial title actually is.
Mm.
Yep. Now, an allodial title, I've only come across one individual in Australia who has an allodial title. He's an Indigenous elder from Canberra who's got a allodial title over his tribal lands as sanctioned by the Supreme Court in Canberra. Now, a allodial title, from speaking to him, is from the centre of the earth to the stars and to as far out to sea as we could see.
Mm.
Original custodians have that allodial title over that. So allodial titles are a bigger thing. Anyone wanting to do that should look up the definitions of allodial title. And then it's all very, very grand to say, I have allodial title over these parameters of this block of land from centre to here and as far as you can see to the parameters of your boundaries of what you're assuming is your land. But then how do you go about getting that approved? How do you go about getting that recognised? Again, it's one thing to make the claim, D, but where's the proof of claim? Back to my $1 million you owe me. I can't prove it. How are you going to prove that you have a allodial title? Shane was able to prove that through his Indigenous heritage and his blood ties connection to the land, because it's where he's from.
Mm.
So it's a very tricky one people do. There are other ways of creating some more increased levels of ownership in your property, taking out your mining, water, and logging rights for exception, putting things to stop things flying over you. You can put all these things in play with your property. There are ways and procedures and stuff you've got to lodge again with the public domain and the government to do so, to have them recognise it. Now, again, it's all very nice and well to have all these amazing documents and do all this stuff, D. But then how do you enforce it? How do you get it recognised by the establishment that doesn't like a lot of this stuff? You've got to find where and how it's recognised under their messed up laws in order to be aside from that. That's what our PMA is able to do for people, is have our laws recognised that we're not under them, we have our own. So
Mm.
whether it's a allodial title or whatever, you need to find a way of doing that. And with a allodial title, unless you're an Indigenous tribal man or woman with those blood ties to the land, that can be really, really difficult for anyone to do. So
Yeah.
if anyone wants to learn a bit about allodial titles, look up a case. I think it was 2016, Mortimer versus Oswide Services, AUSWIDE. Uh, it's called Shane Mortimer was the guy who done it. He's the only one I know that's done it successfully that I've heard of or spoken to. It's called Mortimer versus Oswide Services, Canberra Supreme Court. Have a read of the case and the transcripts as to what occurred and how that went down. It'll give you a better understanding of what and how an allodial title is and how and why they can work and how you can attain one and prove it. Again, we've got to have proof of claim.
Okay.
I can't get my $1 million out of you, D. I can't prove it.
Well, that's good to know, so they can go and check that. Is there a way to sell your home privately without and not pay capital gains?
Yes and no. Yes, short answer is yes. Anything is possible. Anything can be done. I have knocked out up to $70,000 stamp duty claims from people with the likes of Revenue New South Wales. It did take us almost 12 months of paperwork, of a lot of back and forward and correspondence, and a lot of time and energy, both on my behalf and the clients, in order to get that dropped. So yes, it can be done, and it really depends on what have you already signed and agreed to. What are the contracts you're already under before you go, no, I don't want to do that? Are you contractually bound by something you've signed, knowingly or unknowingly, whether or not full discovery and disclosure was provided? The banks and the establishment don't care. You signed it, you're liable. So again, contest versus protest for that sort of thing, D. So
Mm.
all this is possible, and yes, it can be done, but it depends on the conditions of the sale, the contract. Quite often, if you were to sell a house, let's say you had, 10 grand owing with the local council, and you had other things, it's not you that owes the money. They encumber the property with that debt, not you. So then if you sold the house, all those debts get removed before you get the money because that claim existed before you sold. All the
Mm.
creditors need to be paid. So what they do is they just take the money out of the sale price. You don't even get a choice in it sometimes. And it largely depends on the contracts your conveyancers or solicitors have done and what your contractual agreement or obligations are between you as the seller and the buyer, or the other way around. If
Mm.
it's in the contract and you've signed it, you've agreed. So
Mm.
we come back to an unsigned contract is a negotiable instrument. Before you sign it is when we negotiate, not after.
Yeah, makes sense. And does the same thing apply to someone who don't want to pay capital gains on an investment property? Is it kind of the same scenario?
Well, it depends. If they've got it listed on the government registries and through their establishment as an investment property, it's very, very difficult to get around that, because any earnings from there, they're going to list as capital gains. It'll be put down as income. You don't even have to do it. They will do it for you on your behalf, sometimes without your consent, which,
Mm.
yeah, the lack of consent is a big issue there. But again, contest versus protest. Now, a lot of people go, "Oh, but we didn't know any of this when we purchased the house and got the mortgage, or took this on." And as I say, a lot of my clients, I assist with some of these sort of matters, D. I
Mm.
need to see the paperwork. I need to see the contracts. I need to know what you've agreed or not agreed to, and what correspondence has been back and forward. How far down the garden path are we with this? Because when we get to near the end of that path, that's when councils start throwing things like caveats. The banks will do it too. They'll put warrants and possession, orders out for the property. Then they will take it and sell it to get their money back. The property is sold what they refer to as encumbered. So they'll take the price of the alleged debt out of the sale price of the property, whether you like it or not.
Mm. Okay. And
Depends on how it's
would
up
that
front.
apply if someone's selling a property in a company trust and they want to avoid the exorbitant tax? Is that similar to for what you?
Similar to, again, it really depends on what's been agreed to, what's in the contract.
Yeah. Okay. It's all about the contract and what's in there.
Consent.
Consent, that's it.
So that's the big part in all of this.
Yeah. If you don't pay your mortgage, can they take your home even though the original credit was paid off the day you signed the paperwork at the bank? The
But
bank balanced even at the end of the day, so therefore they were never lending you a cent. They obtained the credit through your birth certificate, cestui que vie trust. Can they still take my house?
they can and they do. Now, it's not right. It's technically speaking borderline on legal. It's certainly not fair or just or moral.
Hmm.
The banks are not famous for having morals and ethics.
Yeah.
They don't care. Now, if you're going to challenge them on that ground again, and you're going to make the claim that the trust has already paid for it, how can you prove that? Because the bank sure as shit not going to give you the documents showing you what they've done. Every man and his dog round the world would get their money back for every mortgage ever written. The banks would all go belly up in a week. How do you prove it? This is the key, and to get the bank to do so. Now, the banks are famous for being quite nasty about such matters. So instead of stop paying them, reduce your payments. Go on daily payments if there's no penalties instead of monthly. Monthly, they compound the interest for 28 days. You'll never pay off the principal if you're paying monthly. It's why they make it easy and convenient for you. You know, it's better for the banks because they get to put you over a barrel and make an absolute killing on that. Pay it daily. Interest is calculated at 9 a.m. every morning. Do your direct debit for 8 a.m. every morning, and you pay them a small amount, the same amount you'll be paying over the year, divide it by 365 and give them that each day. Messes with their interest calculations big time. You'll knock years off any mortgage that you actually do have if you are contractually bound to it. That's a midway way of being able to deal with that for people. Get it down from monthly to weekly, at least, if not daily. It's a far better way of operating. And then while you're doing this, then we ask the questions because we're remaining in honour. We're still maintaining our honour and integrity with our contractual obligations while we question them. Same with the council. I said a lot of guys, look, just pay the council rates at 10 or 20 bucks a week, whatever you can afford. And as a sign of good faith and honour, we're going to ask in return for that you guys operate in good faith and honour and supply the requested evidentiary documentation that we've asked for, just to make sure we're all above board and legit here. It's not a challenge. It's a question. We're not fighting them. We're not attacking them. Just asking questions. And we're doing it from a place of honour and integrity. Doesn't get us in the hot seat. If you're already in the hot seat, these can be a lot more difficult to do. So again, contest versus protest.
That's always the main factor in everything.
Contest versus protest and consent. They're massive parts in a lot of all these sort of questions, do you? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know, Zev, if there is a way for mothers who are on Centrelink payments and they obviously there is an obligation for them to vaccinate their children, the childhood vaccines, and they cut payments if they don't. Is there a way around that? Is there something that these women can do or parents?
Nobody can be forced into medical procedures of any type without their free and informed consent. Yep. Now that's just a basic. That's an international thing. People can look that up. It's in our International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, a Declaration of Human Rights. There are the International Covenant on Bioethics and civil and or political rights as well. There are numerous of these international documents that say that medication can't be forced on anyone. So angle the carrot. Now, they don't cut the entire payment if you're on Centrelink for that. Because I know years ago when I was on Centrelink, they contacted me and asked about my daughter, and they said, but you're missing out on money, mate. You get more money per week or fortnight if you went and got it jabbed. And I was curious, not that I was ever going to do it regardless of the amount, Dee, but I was like, how much are we talking, guys? It's like $20 or $30 a week.
Is that the difference?
So you've got to ask yourself, are you prepared to inject your own kid with some sort of experimental poison for $20 or $30 a week? Fuck, they could offer me 20 or 30 bill a week. I still told them jamming up their ass.
Yeah, so there's no way to stop them from, I guess, blackmailing you in that way.
Well, that's what you can say. Are you blackmailing me? Do we have rights to Social Security? Yes, we do. The government has an obligation for its duty of care to provide that for people who are in need. It's not supposed to come with the conditions of medical experimentation or forced medicine or forced vaccinations. And they say, oh, whenever now that everyone's dropping dead and dying suddenly from these bloody introduced jabs, they're like, oh, we never forced anyone to take it. It was your choice. That's really a very grey area, isn't it, after what we witnessed the last few years? People lost their jobs, their livelihoods, their homes, their businesses, their families, their partners, their loved ones over their choice whether or not to take an experimental jab. But it was your choice. Really? There's a lot of coercion and threats of menace and duress going on with that potential offer. You know, and some people didn't know how to not accept the offer and keep bread on the table and a roof over their head. So they chose to take it. It's a touchy subject, Dee. I say to people, we had the choice to take it or the choice to stand up for your rights, stand up for your kids. You chose the easy way out. Again, doing the right thing is not always the easy thing to do. And what did we all benefit out of calling out this BS? Nothing. There was no personal benefit for people like you and I who were attempting to warn people.
Yeah,
And
just
so,
a bit of harassment from the police. That was about it.
and you're not allowed to go. I mean, for me, it was fine. So if you didn't do this and wear a mask and sign in and get jabbed, you couldn't be a part of society. Well, the version of society they wanted us to be a part of, I've never been interested in anyway. That worked fine for me. I was happy. Again, I'm not participating. I'm
Yeah.
not part of it. I'm not even going to fight you over it. I'm just going to say no thanks and politely walk away.
Mm,
That's it. Imagine what would have happened if the whole world had said no thanks at the start of COVID. Would be like we are now, when no one gives a shit.
mm.
And hilariously, Dee, the only people who are still worried about COVID are 5 and 6 jabs in. Work that one out.
Oh God. It's funny when you think about it. Do you have any tips on accessing your superannuation early, like around any ways around the
You
laws
can, if
pertaining?
you're, look, if you've got financial hardship or you've been on Centrelink or benefits for more than 6 months, you can access up to 10K at a time. The other way is to go through a proper accountant and set up a self-managed super fund where you're not accessing the funds. You're not allowed to, as that is for your super, but I mean, I know of people who have purchased a house with their super money and they're sitting on the house as their self-managed super fund.
Hmm.
They've used that as an investment, whatever. There are ways around that. You can't just take out all your super because the government obviously doesn't like that. If there are ways of doing that, I'm unaware of how to go about doing that. You can access 10K at a time, though, if you're in financial hardship. That's been sorted out for people here. They've introduced that in the start of COVID. Otherwise, there are other ways of doing self-managed super funds where you can tie it up in assets and other things for an investment that you're in control of, not the super fund.
Hmm.
Uh, we'll give you the details when we're off here of our very clever and talented accountant. People have got questions about self-managed super funds and need to be careful. We will get the ATO asking questions and or freezing accounts. So it's got to be done in a way that they're happy with too, because again, they're holding the funds. We're not holding it. We don't have access to that. So
Hmm.
self-managed super funds you can, but then you've got to do it properly. There are certain guidelines and rules that need to be, done in accord with, let's say, and highly recommend speaking to an actual accountant who happens to be very good at that. We've got a great one that is a bit more like you and I, let's say, Dee, but also knows the tax and accounting laws very well too to know how that can be used for our benefit. So self-managed super fund is the short answer, and access 10K a year, I think you're allowed to do if you're in financial hardship.
Oh, it's good to know we've got one of those on our side. Helps.
There's a couple of them around. As I said, when we're off here, I will give you the details for our clever and talented accountant that I refer people to for such questions.
Yeah, great. And when it comes to PAYG employee,
Yeah, with E, yeah.
is there a way for people to access that at the end of the financial year?
Look, if you want a PAYG thingy, it's a bit trickier because the tax is automatically taken out of your pay from your employer before you receive it.
Yeah,
Protest versus contest, D. You've got to set that up before you start the job.
I should have known that answer.
One of the other ways, again, PMA. Now we don't work for PMAs, we volunteer for them.
Mm,
So let's say you wanted me to come and build you a garage out the back or a shed. And I said, well, look, my ABC association will be happy to come and build you that shed. So your contract would be between you and the association, once you're a member, of course, D, because otherwise we can't deal with you because you're not in the private with us.
mm,
Once you're a member, then the PMA would invoice you for that shed to be built. It would put some of, obviously the PMA then gets paid. And then because I've done some amazing volunteer work for that PMA, the PMA might then like to afford me a level of sustenance for my volunteer work.
mm,
It's not wages, it's not income, and it's not earnings. It's done as sustenance. It's an outcome, not an income. It's the outcome of the product of our labour, which again, our life force living energy was used to create or produce something of value in order to earn credit, not a debt with the ATO. Where's their equitable contribution to this awesome garage I've just built for you, D? Did
mm.
they do any concrete pouring? Did they pour the slab? Did they set up the string lines? Did they do any framing? So where is their equitable claim on what I've used my life force living energy to create or produce? therefore creating or producing something of value in order to earn credit.
Mm.
Doesn't work.
So the PMA is a great way to get around some of those things.
It's not a way of getting around it. I mean, it's there. It's just done on our terms. And if
Mm.
it's your life force living energy used to create or produce something of value, then you've earned the credit. You're the only one with any equity in that. Unless God or nature wants to make a claim over your life force living energy, being that's where we come from, there's no one else that can make a claim against that, D.
Yeah.
No equity. And let's look at our first two rules of equity law. One, it's equity which compels performance. So again, if the ATO, for example, don't have any equity in my life force living energy, how am I being compelled to perform for them in the absence of a contract, consent, fees, or anything along those lines?
Mm.
And one can only come into equity with clean hands. It's no secret the ATO's hands are far from clean. So they can't come into any equity with their filthy, bloody hands. There's no equity in order to compel me to perform. Now, if they want to claim they have equity, they'd be putting themselves in a position of a slave master or a slaveholder. Funnily enough, they don't like to admit to that, D.
Mm.
Otherwise, how else can they have an equity over our life force living energy used to create and produce things of value? And the credit that we've earned from that is an outcome, not an income. It's an outcome of the product of our labour. Another old maxim of law: a labourer is worthy of his hire. Not a labourer is worthy of his hire after the after the ATO put you over a barrel and took half of what you've created.
Literally.
That's not how the maxim goes. It says a labourer is worthy of his hire. It's a matter of equity when dealing with the ATO. And again, PMAs are a great way of being able to minimise a lot of those obligations by setting ourselves up outside of that. And to do so properly, it's ATO paperwork that we utilise for doing so, D.
Mm.
People go, mate, you can't just not, well, there are options with the ATO pay. We go over this when we do our consults about the PMAs of people, how and why this works. It's ATO paperwork we use. Why does the ATO give us that option if it's not a valid or legal option? How do the big boys all do this? You think the likes of Bill Gates and the WEF cronies, do you think any of them are abiding by the rules that we're told we have to abide by? How are they getting away with it? What are they doing? Again, we're all equal before the law. Why aren't we doing it too? So a PMA, basically look at the PMA as your own version of the World Economic Forum.
Mm.
They're a private members association. They're what's called an NGO, a non-government organisation. We're exactly the same, except we're not interested in ruling the world like Klaus and his mates. We're just interested in governing ourselves and helping our members. Very different approach.
Mm. Yeah, I like that example that you used. I mean, obviously, yeah, with better intentions compared to what they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our intention is to help mankind and humanity, not to depopulate it and, reduce the carbon. Let's be real here, D. You and I are the carbon they're trying to bloody reduce.
So, any insight into declining jury duty?
Look, that's not too bad a one to do, really. If you've got serious work and or family commitments and you can't get as long as you've got a letter from your employer, whatever, stating that, and look, they don't pay you much for the jury duty either. They don't pay you your wages for the day, even if you can prove what you're earning. And
Mm.
if you can't survive on that, they're not allowed to cause harm deliberately or knowingly,
Mm.
financial or otherwise.
Okay.
But you do have the right to, again, it's an offer. You don't have to accept the offer. See, I've been trying for the last hour or so to get you to accept my offer of owing me $1 million, Dean, but you won't accept it. I can't do anything with that. Yeah. The offer must be accepted.
Yeah. You could try the lotto. You'll get more out of that than me.
Well, I'm just as another example here, D, as to how this works. I can't prove it. There's no consent, and the offer was never accepted. It's
Mm.
not looking good for me, is it? I have to
No.
get my $1 million from somewhere else by the looks of things, D, because can't prove it. I don't have a claim.
Now, birth certificates, children, how can you get Medicare for a 2-year-old without a birth certificate? Is that possible?
Haven't actually done it for a Medicare, but if you can prove via affidavits from the mother and father that you are Australian citizens or you're Australian passport holders, you can go direct to some of these government departments conferring that.
Okay.
Now, again, an unrebutted affidavit stands in truth, remains fact in law, fact in commerce. So an affidavit from the birth mother is the greatest affidavit and most strongest first-hand personal knowledge evidence you're ever going to have is from the mother.
Mm.
So, I'm not saying this is across the board, but sometimes paternity can be questionable. We don't always know in some cases who the father is, but we're 300% sure who mum is. She's the one with the big belly for 9 months who actually gives birth and is breastfeeding, all the rest of it. Pretty hard to say, no, that's not mum. Well, hang on. She carried them for 9 months in her belly and actually went through the physical thing of giving birth, something us blokes can't claim to have any knowledge of. We can say we're a witness to the event and all, and I met my partner, whatever, which I don't have, but, for example, I met so and so, I met Jane back in 2010. And after a couple of years, we moved in together. By 2015, we decided we wanted to have kids. Come 2016, this occurred. You run through a step by step chronological order in your affidavit of what's happened. You've got your witness statements and you've got the greatest first hand personal knowledge of a witness statement from the mother that is pretty hard to dispute, especially if you've got midwife, doctors, hospital documents, and everything as well to verify all of that.
Mm.
There's always more than one way to skin a cat. A lot of people aren't comfortable with getting birth certificates for their kids. You can create ID via affidavits and other ways too. I think we spoke about this in one of our other chats at worldcitizengov.org. Not as effective as it used to be back in the day, but it's still a valid form of photo ID.
Mm.
And you can use that to create other ID then for your kids.
And do you also use the affidavit to get a passport, or is the passport pretty easy?
No, the passport's a bit of a tricky one because DFAT is saying no, it's got to go through the post office, and the post office don't like you putting it in without a birth certificate, even though you explain to them, and it can take a bit of time to do. Find a good post office with someone there who actually gets it, is my advice there.
Oh,
And
that's a hard
send that they can send that off then because the post office will go, no, no birth certificate, give it back to you. Can't send it.
one.
You
Okay.
need to be able to explain if you're going to deal with that with some drone at the post office, for example, you need to show them this is an email from DFAT explaining it. This is, the legislation pertaining to that. This is the actual law, and what you're doing is actually not in accordance with the legislation that you're telling me you're bound by. Again, if we're going to make the claim, we've got to provide the proof.
Okay.
Otherwise, the guy at the post office just goes, mate, the computer says no.
That's a challenge, isn't it? When you've got people just like robots, pretty much.
Dealing with robots and drones, go elsewhere.
Okay. So this one, I haven't heard of this before, but what do you think about law common to I, that is setting one's own law for one's own property, land, body, and possessions as a man or woman? Sounds like a PMA maybe, but I don't know.
Pretty much. Like I'm not sure about the law unto I and the reference for that one, but PMA will pretty much answer a lot of that when they're set up and done correctly and operated properly as well.
Mm.
Again, the PMAs aren't a free for all for anarchy. We still have to be honourable. We still have to have integrity. We can't go around causing harm, loss, damage, or injury, or have the intent or intention to do that via action or inaction.
Mm.
Pretty straightforward sort of stuff there. But as far as property and protecting assets, that's trust that we use for that. So, and don't go with one of these private irrevocable trusts.
Mm.
The private trust, they changed the laws in this country a year or two ago, nearly 2 years back now, where it's really, really difficult, if not near and impossible, for a private trust to hold real and tangible property.
Mm.
Set up a discretionary trust or another type. Speak to someone who knows trusts to make sure it's the right for your individual things. Lock it away under the trust. Get in touch with us at Warrior Law. I help edit some of these trust deeds to give them a higher level of privacy. That is not private trust. They can still operate quite privately though.
Mm.
But if you're planning on holding land, you need to be able to talk with the land titles office for them to recognise what we've done. Otherwise, you won't get your titles and deeds. So it's a very fine line to tiptoe. It can be done.
Okay.
So PMA to answer that question, and for asset protection, set up a decent trust.
Someone's asked, are the sovereign tribes like lawmen protected since the Queen gave it back to traditional landowners?
Our tribal people in this country have their own system and establishment of law, which has existed for tens or hundreds of thousands of years before the rest of us turned up. First in time, first in law. We're on tribal land. Tribal law applies to you.
Mm.
When Captain Cook supposedly arrived here, whatever, again, I mean, I don't trust the news. I don't trust a lot of what we're taught as history either, because there's always two sides to that. But it's well documented that the Terra Nullius thing was an absolute fraud and a sham, because there is how many records of established civilizations and tribes living in harmony here when Cook and that turned up.
Mm.
First in time, first in law. Tribal law applies. So, yeah, they are recognised as. We had a massive High Court case, I think back in 218, 219, called Love versus the Commonwealth, which is an Indigenous bloke that took the Commonwealth to the High Court. Now, not that they needed the recognition of the High Court, again, because they had their sovereignty intact. It was never ceded.
Mm.
But the High Court in that case recognised the rights of sovereigns to form their own sovereign government and governance.
Mm.
So there's High Court case law that supports exactly that. So, yes, tribes can do that for themselves because they're of this land. And they were here long before the rest of us. First in time, first in law.
Mm. Do you help people out with that kind of stuff, Zev?
Oh, look, if any of the mob come to me saying that, we need help with whatever, I'll always help any of our tribes here. They have been shafted repeatedly and treated as less than second-class citizens since colonialism arrived here in this country. I'm sure I'm not the only Aussie that thinks that the way we've treated our tribes is beyond disgusting. And that's certainly something that needs to change. But again, we're not asking permission, especially for the tribes. They have no need to ask permission. Just inform them of what we're doing. The same as what I do. I don't ask the government or the establishment permission to do my own plates or any of that sort of thing, Dee. I just inform them of what I'm doing. I'm not asking permission. I don't need it. And the tribes sure as shit don't need permission from anywhere other than their own tribe for their tribal lands.
Yeah. It's like they've got their own PMA in their tribal law and sort of thing. That's how I see
Yeah,
it.
it mightn't be written on paper, but it's there. It exists. It's existed for thousands of years. Well, we can't undo that. We have no authority to. This is the whole fiasco with the voice referendum.
Mm.
Who the fuck do the rest of Australia think we are that we're going to decide whether or not another type of people get a voice that they already have?
Mm.
This is one of the most disgusting displays from our government I've seen in many, many years.
Yeah, that was total bullshit. Total waste of time, resources, money.
How does any of us have the right to speak for another or to say whether or not another can speak? Tribal or not, that's wrong on so many levels, Dee.
So we've got someone asking, when it comes to capturing our images of our vehicles whilst driving, is there something we can do to protect our personal images of the cars, vehicles, and us? Because of being constantly surveyed, and we have a right to move freely, but they're capturing all of that. So I guess they want to know, is there something you can do about that?
All right, don't travel in areas where there's cameras. If you know there's cameras there and you're traveling, you're out in the public, you're open game. Now, the use of that footage is another issue.
Mm.
Yep. Are they allowed to use it? Oh, excuse me. Are they allowed to use it for anything? Yep. Now, if you've done, say, like we do with our UCC filings, we include a copyright notice with that, which not only copyrights the name in upper and lower case and in the house of, but it also copyrights anything to do with your physical flesh and blood body, including any physical part that might be removed and or any images, your breath, your voice, anything that's come from in here is yours. And
Mm.
without the authorization to use that for any purpose, any unauthorized use is prohibited. Now, let's say you're traveling around Sydney, for example, Dee, and you've got New South Wales plates on there. It's not your car. You've registered it to the state of New South Wales. It's theirs. You're renting it.
Yes, exactly.
Part of why I put my own plates on my car, because it doesn't belong to the state anymore. It belongs to me now. It's my asset, my security instrument. And I hold the security interest, the equity, and the lien over it. So it can't be taken off me.
Mm.
So if you're going to go out in public and you don't want to be on camera, don't go where there's cameras. Now, the issue of challenging on what they can and can't do with the use of that. And having said that, guys, the copyright, if you were to send me stuff of footage you captured of me traveling around, whatever, and so you're going to use it for, I can't go, look, D, you owe me $1 million for breach of copyright. I might have my claim here for that mill yet, D. Um, I can't do that to you unless I make sure that you're aware of that copyright. You must have seen the notice. It's got to be cited, and you must full discovery and disclosure must be provided. Now, if I've informed you of the copyright, you've laid eyes on it, or I've given you a copy of it, and then you knowingly and willfully go and use any of that footage or surveillance or my name or anything about that, then I have a claim. But I can't just go, sucked in, you used my name or whatever, you owe me $1 million, because that's what's on our copyright notice for breach of. I need to make you aware of that first. This is the issue a lot of people have with this public and private. It's like two highways. Which one are you traveling on? We can choose. We can operate from one to the other at our choice. We just can't do them both at the same time. And
Mm.
if you're going to be out and about traveling around in the public, you're going to be on film. Now, you can stop them any unauthorized use of that footage. It's not going to stop them capturing the image of you. It's the use of that we have the issue with.
Mm.
You got the cameras are there. You know, you went there. You consented to being on film. It's pretty hard to say I don't consent, mate. There's signs everywhere. There's 100 cameras in the CBD in Sydney. You knew damn well you were going to be on film. If you don't want to do that, don't go there.
Mm.
One of my other quotes, Steve, like you can't blame a clown for acting like a clown. Ask yourself why you keep going back to the circus. If you know that's the case, why keep going back?
Mm. I guess there is a growing concern in society where they are really increasing surveillance and putting cameras in a lot of places. And I guess people are a little bit irked about being watched everywhere.
Well, none of us like it. And again, the establishment, our so-called government, will say, if you're not doing anything wrong, then what's the problem? Well, hang on, what are you doing with that footage?
Mm.
Yeah, if you're not doing anything wrong with the footage, then I have nothing to worry about. I'm not worried about me. I'm not a criminal.
Mm.
But the question remains, what are you using that footage for? Oh, it's for public safety. Oh, so if there's no harm, loss, damage, or injury, there's no danger, you'll delete the footage. No. All right, so what are you using it for? It's the use of that
Yeah.
we can catch them on. Yeah, look, ideally, yeah, we'd like to have all the cameras removed and stuff. Like, I know growing up as a kid, we didn't have any of that shit when I was a kid.
Mm.
No place you saw cameras were banks and government buildings and courthouses. No one else had them.
Mm.
Nowadays, everywhere's got CCTV. So you've got to make people aware that your image is part of your copyright and you do not consent to any unauthorized use. And we do that part of our UCC filings.
Okay.
It's included in the long list of documents we do for UCCs from that. And then, of course, too, under our PMA, if you're out engaging in the public, yes, we can still operate under the PMA. But if you're walking into a public space that you know is full of cameras, don't be upset when your image is captured on film. You can prevent the use of that footage by informing them of copyright or whatever else. No unauthorized use, that's fine. But if you're going to a public area that's full of cameras, you're on camera, or don't go to those areas. If you don't footage of you used, yeah, do something along the lines of a UCC, get all that copyrighted properly, recognised under international laws, and then inform them that you don't consent. So if you have to go somewhere where there is cameras everywhere, let them know. Images of you are copyrighted and you do not consent to any unauthorized use. They must contact you for the authorization to use that footage.
Okay, that's a good way to navigate through that issue because it's only going to get worse.
I
And
think there's too many people out there that are just like, at everything and want to fight against everything and everyone and anything to do with the government. And it's like, fighting is exhausting. It takes a lot of effort and energy. Why not just go and live a happy, peaceful, honorable life instead and not worry about that?
mm,
Or just not participate. It's so much easier.
yeah, agreed.
Just opt out.
Yeah. Got a few questions on fines, but like parking fines, speeding fines, licensing, we've covered that in past videos, so I'm not going to touch on that.
Look, if people want to learn more about that too, guys, get in touch with us via the website, warriorlaw.com. Part 6 of the workshops and the videos we've done, I go into a bit more detail about all that for people as to what they actually are. And look, I'll just leave that one short there and just say that again, if it's punishable by a fine, then it's legal for a price.
Mm.
Yeah, look at Rio Tinto, for example. You guys can't bulldoze that. It's a sacred cave. It's got rock art. There's sacred artifacts. There's endangered species in trees, and it's $100,000 fine. And we
Mm.
come up the next day, and what have Rio Tinto done? They've bulldozed the entire bloody area. And your government, whatever, go and say, guys, we told you you can't do that. There's $100,000 fine. They go, meh, job cost an extra $100,000 to do. We don't care. They don't see it as they've done the wrong thing. They see it as the price of doing business.
Mm.
It's legal for a fee. I see you guys don't care if we're like the Indigenous obviously cared, but the government didn't give a shit as long as they got their money for it. It's legal for a fee.
Mm.
What happens when it's punishable by fine? It's the cost of doing business. Fines don't affect the rich, do you? They only bother the rest of us. For them, it's the cost of doing business. They don't care. It's a system designed to oppress those of us who aren't filthy rich.
Mm. And could that information apply to voting fines, or is voting fines a different kettle of fish?
Pretty much almost exactly the same there, Dee. Same. And where's the voting fine coming from? Who's issuing it?
Mm.
Do they have the authority to issue a fine? And if so, can you prove that you had the authority to issue the fine? Australian Electoral Commission is not the judiciary. They can make a claim, but then they need to provide proof of that claim for it to be enforced. They
Mm.
can't say, "Oh, you didn't vote, we're sending you a fine, you haven't paid it, it goes to revenue." Now, Revenue New South Wales are attempting to enforce an unverified, uncorroborated claim in the absence of facts or evidence or a guilty verdict or a conviction. Again, it's no different to me trying to enforce a claim that you owe me $1 million, D. It's the same bloody thing.
Same questions. Where do you derive your authority from? Did I consent?
We break it down to its very base elements here. Like, look, you can play with all the legislation. Like, I do that for shits and giggles. I enjoy watching them fall on their own sword, so to speak, using their own BS against them.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's not needed. Pick your fights, pick your battles, guys. You
Yeah.
don't have to take on absolutely everything. I have clients saying, right, I'm not paying fines anymore. I'm not doing tolls and telling the bank to jam it on the mortgage. I'm not paying the council rates. I don't want to be a part of this. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. One at a time. You need to learn. You can't just go, no, I know it's all fraud and I'm not participating, because they will come at you big time. You've got
Yeah.
to get your ducks in a row first. Set yourself up. You've got to be able to have your proof of claim for all the things that you're going to claim. Yes, we can prove it. Now it's your turn.
So someone has asked, why is this fraudulent government allowed to operate and have their own constitutional rules? And why isn't anyone doing anything about this corruption? I thought there were laws in place to stamp out these corrupt politicians. And what are the federal police for?
Uh, they're all, short answer is they're all bought and paid for. Now, yes, we do have a constitution. Now, a quick one on that. The constitution has nothing to do with you and I, do. The constitution is not there to govern we the people, because who created the constitution? We the people. Again, that which we create can't have authority over us, can it?
It's true.
Just like we don't get authority above God or nature, because that's what created us. So we the people, created that constitution to protect us from the government. We actually stand above the Constitution. It even says that in the Constitution, that we, the people, will always have supreme authority, because we created the Constitution as a buffer to protect us from our government. Even back in 1900, 1901, when our Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia was done, we knew we needed to have some sort of protective mechanism in place, a system that governed our government, told the government how they were allowed to govern the people, again, by consent. Hence, we have a constitution. That's what it was for. That's what it was designed as. It was created by we the people to govern the government. It was never set up to govern we the people. It's designed to govern them, not us.
Mm.
Now, of course, they're not doing a lot of that. Now, got some very talented people in the law community around Australia who have been trying for the last couple of years to take the government to the High Court to hold them to account for a lot of what you just asked about. We can't get the matter heard. They won't approve an app. It doesn't matter how many hoops these guys have jumped through. We still don't have a date for any of this to be heard in court. The very system and establishment that these government officials and parliamentarian judiciary are all part of, these are the same mongrels who write these legislation and rules and statutes. They always write the backdoor and escape clause into it for themselves. Do you ever recall seeing a politician or a high-ranking judiciary member be charged with any of the crimes that they've committed?
No.
Why? Because they know the laws. They write the laws, they write the backdoors and escape clauses in for themselves. Again, we're all equal before the law. It works for us too.
Mm.
We just need to know how to apply that. So there are people attempting to do something about it, Dee, but you want to take the system through a system court
Mm.
and have them find in your favour to agree that the system is in fact unlawful or illegal or unconstitutional. It's the system that funds that court. They're never going to turn on themselves, not at that level, like for beating fines and, smaller minor matters, yeah, but you're talking about what, bringing down the government with a court order? Who pays the courts? Our government. They're never going to bite the hand that feeds them. So instead of, again, why are we interested in all this fighting with the system? I'm going to take it on. Why not just wander over here and not participate and operate under a PMA or our own system of governance? Do you guys want to have your fraudulent, corrupt BS, whatever? Have it over there somewhere.
Mm.
Not part of it. Again, we so many people want to take on the system. We've got to fight for all this. Why don't we just lead by example and show people that there are other options? There's another way that's more peaceful, less taxing on our time and energy. We can just not participate. We can create our own system of laws, governance, and government through a PMA. And there's other options that we can do all this through as well. But we've got to get all of our paperwork. We've got to have proof of claim before we start making claims. We've got to be able to prove it. So it's just a matter of setting ourselves up properly to do so. I mean, I used to be of that mindset, D, where I was like, let's go them all, let's take them on, let's fight the system, let's fight for this and fight for our rights. And I realised I'm doing a lot of fighting for little point. It's very energy expensive.
Yeah.
And all right, it can be a bit of fun and entertaining, but what does it achieve?
Mm.
You know, and for what mean and ends? What, so we can be left alone? To avoid that government overreach and oversight, we don't have to fight to achieve it. That's the point. It's why we do things like PMAs. We don't have to have that fight anymore. We can just calmly and politely, with little to bugger all energy, go, no thanks. How much nicer and easier is that? I don't know why these people have this mindset. I'm going to take on the system. Mate, it'd be like me getting in the ring with Muhammad Ali. I'm going to get my ass bloody handed to me. I'm not playing.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. There are other ways. And it's just a way of just not participating. And again, guys, if you want to participate in the public, all right, I'm in the private. I might have to go to a doctor's tomorrow. I might like those public benefits and privileges while I'm at the doctor's, and I'll use my Medicare card, for example. As soon as I walk out of the doctor's, though, the private hat goes back on. It's a right to choose.
Mm.
Again, without choice, it's not a right. Different mindset for people watching. Guys, stop wanting to fight and take everything on. Not participating is a lot easier and far more peaceful.
There are a lot of angry people out there for what's happened, and I totally understand that. But it's also been a blessing where, because of what's happened, we've realized how trapped well, not trapped, but how much we've given our power away. And we've come up with other ways to live. So don't
Yeah,
focus on that anymore. Find your own way in the private, in the PMAs, in the UCCs. And that's the most, yeah, efficient way to use your energy rather than directing it at these imbeciles.
I don't care.
Yeah.
No, they've well and truly demonstrated that they do not care. We've seen that the last few years with all the COVID nonsense.
Mm.
It was never in the best interest of we the people. It was never about our health. It was and always will be and always was about control. So
Exactly.
opt out. Stop accepting the offers, guys. Oh, but we're offering all these amazing benefits and privileges. Yeah, but in exchange to receive those, I've got to hand over my inalienable rights. No thanks. That's a pretty shitty deal, one that I'm not accepting.
Well, thank you so much, Zeb, for your time again.
That's
You've
all right. Thanks for having us on again, Dee. And look, if we get another build up of questions, happy to do another one of these chats with you as well. And just look, to finish off, guys, mindset is a big part of it. Yeah. Stop wanting to fight and take all this shit on when we don't need to.
Mm.
Learn who and what you are in here. And when you really get that in here, you're off limits. They know that they can't affect you anymore because anything they do and say is of little to no consequence to us once we know who and what we are.
I don't know if you believe this, Zev, but I also feel like it's an energetic thing
Yeah.
because I've noticed since I've really stepped into my power, I know who I am. I don't have fear. I don't have doubt. Every time there's like an RBT or something where you have to be
That's
stopped,
true, don't you?
I just never get stopped anymore, and I've like not had to deal with them anymore. And I think energetically, it's because I'm just not vibrating at that frequency that these people, these, police officers, whatever, are vibrating at. And it doesn't work. It doesn't
Well,
align.
coming from here, that makes a big diff. Two, no fear. It's the fear they play on, fear and ignorance.
Yeah,
It's what they're relying upon. And when we're not ignorant and we're not fearful, they don't know how to deal with us.
exactly. Well, I'll put your details on the video so that people can reach out to you. I
Yep.
also want to just clarify to everyone, I don't help people with their legal cases because I get people reaching out to me. I don't have the capacity to do that. I've already got a lot on my plate with, my own business, and it's just not something I specialize in. Like you're the professional, you specialize in that. So they should all go to you, not ask me. And yeah, so they will just send an email through to you guys or fill out the contact form on your website and reach out for anything that they need help with, I guess.
Look, if it's, I'm pretty honest, people, D, if it's something I can't help you with, I'll tell you. It's got to be pretty out there for me not to have dealt with it in the past. But generally, if I can't, I'll know someone who can.
That's
So there's always more than one way to skin a cat, guys. We've got to learn who and what we are. Stop fighting. Stop wanting to reclaim that which you never lost. Stop wanting to fight everything and everyone over this. Just opt out. Just not participate. Just step out of the way over here and go and do our own thing. We're not criminals. We should be left alone. And that's basically it, Dave. If we're operating with honour and integrity, we're not out there causing harm, loss, damage, and injury. What's the problem? What's the issue? Why are we being prevented and why is it being made so difficult to just live a peaceful and honourable life?
Yeah,
All most of us want.
that's it. We are I guess making way for better ways of living, simpler, easier ways, and finding other solutions. So, and as difficult as it has been for us, it really seems like it's getting better, and yeah, you're making so much way for the future with your work.
Well,
Uh,
it's not about me, D. I've said even before I had my own daughter, whatever, that it's not about me. It's
yeah,
about the next generation and the generation after them. What legacy are we leaving behind for future generations? If we don't act on this shit, we can see all this stuff going on and we do nothing about it. We're part of the problem. We're not the solution. And this is the big thing for me. I haven't done the PMA for me. I've done it for members to help others to set up your own PMAs. Well, I'm walking proof that it works. I'm doing this stuff myself successfully. That's why I show people I'm actually doing it. It's not just stuff that I talk about. I
yeah,
actually do it and live it. I test it before I suggest someone else does this sort of stuff. And look, some of it didn't go well, but that's how I learned. I've learned then. Right, don't do that, guys, because I've tried that and it went spectacularly pear-shaped. But this, on the other hand, works really well. And the easiest way to avoid any and all of this government stuff, look, three things: your assets and properties under a trust and a decent trust. Make sure you've got a proper one. Get your UCC stuff sorted so that you can protect your straw man, the person, and the claims against the name. And then, if you want to be free of all this government bureaucratic nonsense, get yourself set up under your own PMA. create your own system of governance and government, which we have every right to do, and live by that instead. It
Mm.
doesn't be a complex, complicated scenario for people to do. It just takes time to learn.
Doing amazing things, Ev. Really appreciate, what you're doing for others and finding ways for us. Always love having you on, picking your brain, and I'm sure we'll do another one again.
Well, it's nice to come and do, Dee. And look, some of your questions keep me on my toes, so it's good. So, and it's just getting some different info out for people to let them know that there are other options available. I think I spoke with you last time about my tea and coffee argument. Yeah. Just because the option wasn't offered doesn't mean it's not available. That's another big thing we've got to remember too, guys. The government's only offering us tea and coffee. I want my whiskey. I'm not accepting the offer. I'm going to go over here somewhere else and have my whiskey that's not part of your thing because you guys don't do whiskey and I don't want tea and coffee. Create the own option. If the options aren't there that we're after, create them ourselves. It's the beauty of a PMA that we can do that under one of those. They've just got to be set up properly
That's it. We just got to think outside the box. It's not,
and
yeah.
operate outside the box as well. They keep trying to put you back in that box, but I haven't been in that box in most of my adult life, Dee, and I'm not getting back in there ever.
I don't blame you, Zev. I don't blame you. When you've come out into the free world, it's a hard place to go back to.
Once you feel this, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you can't unlearn. It's a lifestyle choice. It's not something we use. Oh, I got a parking ticket. I need to let no, guys. This is a lifestyle choice. It's not something we just do when we have to do a tax bill or a fine or whatever. It's a lifestyle choice. It's a way of living. It's a system of living. Again, our PMAs. It's your own governance to live by. You're creating something that you can actually be a part of that
Mm.
you're happy about that actually works for we the people, not against we the people.
Yes, that's exciting. I'll definitely be hitting you up for that PMA because I think it would be really useful for me as well. I haven't done that yet, so yeah.
Especially with naturopathy stuff, D. There's a lot of people in the allied health love them for that reason because, and look, if they do try and make another invisible boogeyman, we've got disease X or whatever the hell they're calling it now that's going to come and I just have to laugh about all this now. And there's a public health order. You're not dealing with the public anymore. You're only dealing with your private members.
Yeah.
The public health orders, if they try and pull that nonsense again, aren't going to apply to your PMA or your private members. You're not dealing with the public. It's not a private health order, is it? These are some of the little nuances that PMAs can be real effective and beneficial for people for. Learning the difference between public and private, fact and fiction, living and dead. This is all key components to all of this to get you. Again, you've got to know it in here. Then we can start to really do this and put your best foot forward.
Yeah. Well said.